welcome to another Linguistiko class. Alexander, can you hear me?
Hello,
Hi, welcome.
I'm Alexandra Serra. I'm from Venezuela, but now I have been living in Prague.
Living where?
In Prague.
In
Czech
Prague. Oh,
Republic.
awesome. Cool.
Yes.
Fun. Okay, and we've got Natalie. Hi, Natalie, welcome.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you doing? And Fabian.
Yes.
So welcome to another class. So this class is about preparing for interviews. So if you've ever had to have a job interview in English, and how to prepare, how to feel comfortable, how not to get nervous, and how to answer the questions that you're probably going to be asked in a job interview. So for this class, what we're going to do is first watch a short video with some tips about how to prepare for an interview. So for that, we're going to need the YouTube app within Google Hangouts. If you guys don't already have that, you'll have to add it. So the way that you add the YouTube app is on the left-hand side. There should be little icons, just like the Linguistiko app. And if you click on the ... the 3 dots, and then there should be an option for Add App. And then within that, if you select YouTube, and if not, I can send you the link, but it's better if we can all watch it together. So let me know if you have any trouble or questions.
Sorry, give me.
Yeah, sure, take your time. I'm going to send the link just so that we have just in case.
A moment, please.
No, I can't enter in the YouTube application.
No. Are you using a computer or a tablet?
A computer.
Computer? Okay, so then on the very bottom, on the left-hand side, there should be options like screen share, a camera, Linguistiko app. Oh, there we go. Fabian added it. Thank you. If you click on the ... and add apps, there should be a list of different apps, and if you scroll through, you should see YouTube.
Yes, I press YouTube.
Okay, great. So then you got it.
Nata, sí, Facebook. Nata.
Sorry?
So, Fabian?
Okay.
So, okay. You got it? So then, in order to watch the video all together, you'll just have to click on the app, and then there should be a screen.
I don't see anything. Okay, go. I'm going to try to understand.
Did you download the app?
You have in the tablet in the left side.
There is
On the
nothing.
left, there
There
should
is
be
no
options.
icons, no icons, options.
No. There's not anything.
Touching the left side.
Fabian. No.
Because otherwise, I was going to send you the link in the chat, but since I don't think you could access the chat either, it'll be difficult to watch the video. So you should have had like a Linguistiko Hangout app in order to enter the class. Is there options on the side that say like screen share, Linguistiko Hangout app, control room, settings like that? No?
I'm going to try to connect me with my computer.
Okay. Okay, so we can watch the video multiple times. It's a short video. It's 5 tips for interviews. And they're really important tips. And so I want you guys to pay attention because later we're going to talk about them and try to remember what the 5 tips were. So I'm going to pull up the app. We'll watch it multiple times since Natalie will come back. So if you guys, please let me know. If you have any trouble, write to me in the chat or like make a sign or something because the microphones are going to be muted. But let me know if you can hear it, okay? Okay, were you all able to see and hear the video?
Yes, yes, but
Yes.
in the moment they stop, it stopped. Can we repeat the video?
Sure.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, but before we repeat it, any questions, any words that were new, anything that was particularly hard? Or just want to hear it again?
No, again.
Just again, okay.
Okay.
Okay. All good?
Okay.
Yep, okay, good. Okay, so any questions, any difficulty understanding anything they said in the video? Did they talk a little quickly?
In the last point, what does mean? For example, what does mean your entire interview to the company organization? What does
Taylor?
mean?
They mean the word Taylor?
Yes, the word your entire interview to the company. Is
Yeah,
like a preparing all
yes, so
interview?
to tailor means to adjust like little things so that you're not giving the same interview to different companies. So for example, if I'm interviewing at a nonprofit that works with like water sanitation, then I'm going to want to make sure all of my answers, my resume, all has to do with that company, and that I know what my answers are going to be and what they're looking for and what they want in an employee. And then I'm going to try to answer so that I fit their description. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay, so then I'm going to pull this up. So then can you guys remember what were the 5 tips? Alexandra, do you remember any of the 5 tips?
Yes, that you need to check the information about the company.
Good, right, good, perfect. So number 1 was research the company. Good. What about you, Fabian? Anything else?
I don't remember what number is it, but I remember one of these is prepare successful stories.
Exactly, good. Yep, so that was the screenshot I have here. Right. Number 3, prepare a few success stories that you can reference. So that's always a good idea, because you might be a little caught off guard if they ask you for examples or if they ask you to elaborate, right? So if you say, my biggest strength is that I work well with people, and they say, okay, can you give us an example? You have to be able to have stories already prepared so that you don't stop and say, and not know what to say. So if you already have stories ready to tell that show, you're good with people, you're good at giving presentations, then you don't have to worry if they ask for examples or if they ask, to elaborate and give a little bit more information. Perfect. Anything else? What about you, Alexandra? Do you remember any other tips? So I think we've got 3 so far.
Yes, you need to make some questions to the interviewer about the position, about the company, but so that you are interested about this position or this.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Good. Yeah. So that's something that a lot of people forget to do or don't do, right? Is that it's not just the person interviewing you asking you questions. It's also you have to ask them questions, right? Because it shows that you've done your research, you know what questions to ask, that you're interested in the company, and that you want to know more. Exactly. Okay. Fabian, do you remember the last one?
No, okay, the last one was that I said that to have the HR interview of the company.
Yes. So the one that we're missing, right, I think was this one, to prepare and practice, right? So this is actually exactly what we're going to be doing in this class. So this class, we're going to go through the top 10 most common questions that you're going to be asked in interviews and talk about strategies, talk about the good things to do, the bad things to do, so that you're prepared to answer questions that are most likely going to be asked of you in an interview. Okay, so these are the 5 tips. So we've got research the company, which is always a good idea, especially in this age, right? You can Google just about anything, so you should research the company and the position, know exactly what they want. Prepare and practice. Practice makes perfect, right? Never a bad idea to practice your answers. Have some stories to tell, always good, just for a backup. Also, if you don't know what to say in an interview, if you ever get stuck, it's always a good idea to have a few stories ready to be able to tell them and show them what you've done in your previous employer, and things like that. Then prepare questions and tailor your answers. Okay. Good. So any questions so far?
No.
No? Okay. Good. So what we're going to do now is look at the top 10 questions. So these are the most frequently asked questions in interviews. So, Alexandra, could you read the first 5? So the first 5, yeah.
Okay. What is your greatest strength? What is your greatest weakness? Where are you living or have left your job? Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job?
Good. Okay. And then Fabian, could you read the last 5?
Why should we hire you? How do you handle stress and pressure? Describe a difficult work situation, project, and how you overcome it. How do you evaluate success? What are your goals for the future?
Exactly. Perfect. Okay. So, Alexandra, is there any one of these that seems especially difficult for you? Which one do you think is the hardest question? Which one would make you really nervous to ask?
What is your greatest weakness?
What is your greatest weakness? Okay, cool. So we'll talk about that. Okay, so your greatest weakness. So this is a really, really hard question, right? Because it's essentially asking you to say bad things about yourself, right? So it's one of the hardest questions. So I've got 3 suggestions, 3 sort of strategies for answering this question. So there's 3 of them. So the first one is to talk about a non-essential skill for that particular job. So for example, you're gonna want to know exactly what they want. So if you found the job description, like on Craigslist or online or in a newspaper, you're gonna see essential skills, right? So that can be like, I don't know, filing, like clerical work, different things that you need to be able to do. So those are gonna be your essential skills. So, for example, if I'm going to be a nurse in a hospital where I'm going to be working with people, administering tests, right, doing IVs, things like that, a non-essential skill could be like public speaking, right? So that job doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be good at public speaking. So one strategy for my greatest weakness would to be talk about that. So I could say, well, for this job, for the nursing job, right, I'm really skilled in this, I have all these qualities, but my greatest weakness is public speaking, right? I get really nervous in front of people, but I've been able to overcome it and things like that.
But always we must to speak about a non-essential skill. Yes.
Yeah, so I have three strategies, right, for this question. And the first strategy is to mention a skill that's not really important for the job, right? Because it would be a bad idea if they say, what's your greatest weakness? And you say, working with people, like I don't work well with people. And the job has to work with people every day, right? So you want to make sure that one of your weaknesses is something that doesn't really interfere with the job that you're applying for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one strategy. So the other strategy is similar. It's to talk about a non-essential skill, but to mention improvements. So when someone asks you, what's your greatest weakness? You could say, oh, well, I really struggled with, I don't know, with math, with calculus in college, but I was able to raise my grade from like a C to a B in one semester or something, right? So say something that you're bad at, but say something that you've gotten better at so that you've been able to improve. Because that way it shows that you're aware of things that you're like not good at, but you're motivated enough to try to improve, right? So if they say, what's your weakness? So I could go back to the example of like a nurse with public speaking. I could say, I'm not very good at public speaking, but I did have to give a presentation last year and I practiced for weeks and it actually wasn't that bad, right? So you can say things like, this is my weakness, but I'm actively working to make it better, right? So that's another way. And then the last way, or the last strategy that I have to offer you guys is probably the best thing to do because it's kind of like cheating, right? It's turning a negative into a positive. So if they ask you for your greatest weakness, it's never a bad idea to say something that's really actually a good thing, right? So an example of this is if I'm interviewing for a job and they say, what is your greatest weakness? I could say, well, I am really crazy about being organized, right? So like everything I do has to be done perfectly. I have to be on time. Like, and if things aren't on time, then I get really upset or something. So like, it's a weakness, right? But it also means that I will be a really careful worker, that I'll make sure things get done on time. So it's actually a positive thing. So it's not necessarily a weakness, although when I say it, I can frame it as something bad, even though it's really something that's going to be positive and productive in the long run. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then Alexandra, which strategy would you use? What's an example of something that you would say if someone asked you what your greatest weakness was?
I think that the third one, because I have this problem, I'm very perfectionist, and I try to follow up every time, but I try to tell that it's better and bad, both things, that you are very perfectionist, but you try to follow up all the tasks and try to be careful in your job or something like this.
Exactly, good, yes. So that's always a good thing to say, right? Because it can be a weakness, but it also can have lots of really good side effects. Exactly. Okay. So then what about you, Fabian? What would you say if an interviewer asked you what your greatest weakness was?
Okay, I think my greatest weakness could be I try to make everything perfect. The homeworks that I have to do, I try to make very well. And I spend a lot of time working, but the good point of that is that I'm sure that if I do the work, I'm sure that it will be all right.
Be correct, huh? Exactly. Good, awesome. Good. So those are some 3 ways, 3 approaches, right? If you're not sure how to answer that question, you can always use those. Perfect. Okay, so then I'm going to go to you, Fabian. So after what's your greatest weakness? Which one of these questions seems difficult, or would you not know how to answer? We're going to go through all of them, so there's no wrong answer.
Why should it's a simple question, but it's an important answer for the interview.
So, which one? Sorry?
Why should we hire you?
Why should we hire you? Okay, good. So, why should we hire you? Okay, so this first tip I've got here, right? Think of the job listing and skills required. So this is probably the most important advice I have to give for this one. So like I mentioned before, if you have a job description or like a newspaper article, wherever you found the job, however you heard about the job, most likely in the job description there's going to be lists of skills, right? So it could be like, we're looking for someone who's good with people, we're looking for someone who's fluent in 2 languages, we're looking for someone with experience working with children, for example. So you're going to want to really focus on those things, right? Because that's what they're looking for in an employee. So when they ask you things like, what's your greatest strength, or why should we hire you, this is an example of that tip number 5, right? You're going to tailor your answer. So your answer to one company is going to be different from your answer to another company because you're going to want to focus on what they're looking for, right? So if I'm applying for a job for a kindergarten teacher and they want someone who's charismatic, or I'll say a kindergarten teacher at a bilingual school. They want someone who's charismatic, who's worked with children before, and who is bilingual. Then those are the things I'm going to really want to focus on when they ask, why should they hire you? I'm going to say, well, like I fit the job description perfectly, right? I'm this and this and this. So that's step 1. And then step 2 is you want to keep it concise, right? So it's sometimes easy for sort of bigger questions like this, like why should we hire you? It's easy to say too much, right? To just keep talking and say a lot of things and say, oh, this reason, this reason, this reason. You're going to want to keep it, to 3 or 4 or 5 solid reasons, and not try to give too much explanation, too much information. And then the last thing is that this is related to the first thing, right? So you're going to want to reference past work experience, awards, achievements, anything that proves, why you're good, and focus on why you are unique and good for the position. So the step 1 is sort of really basic, right? So I'm gonna keep going with the bilingual kindergarten teacher example. So for step 1, I'm going to want to know that that's what they want, right? 1, 2, 3, right? Charismatic, bilingual, good with children. And then I'm going to want to give really specific examples as to why I especially am the best for that. So I could say, well, I'm bilingual, I work really well with children, because in my last job, right, my main responsibility was to oversee, like 45 children at the same time, and I won an award for so-and-so, right? So you're going to want to reference like your resume, things that you've done in the past that prove and show that you're good, but tailored to those like categories from the job description, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So then let's think of some more examples. So Alexandra, what kinds of jobs have you applied for? Do you want to apply for? What's a hypothetical situation you would find yourself in?
Well,
I'm trying to think of more examples that aren't a kindergarten teacher.
I have a special situation because I moved to Prague,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm in this process for the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I am seeking a finance job.
Finance? Mm-hmm.
Finance, yes, in finance, but in English because I don't know tech.
Uh-huh.
And well, it's very difficult because you need to find a job position that only speak in English,
Mm-hmm.
and or in Spanish, depend, or customer service or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I try to follow these steps when it was the interview.
Great. Okay, so finance, so customer service is a good one. Customer service. So, for example, if you were being interviewed for a customer service job that listed, here, let's say English fluency, working well with people, patience, and also experience with office work. So if those were the like 4 things that were in the job description, how would you respond to the question, why should we hire you?
Well, because I speak English and Spanish, and if you have a multilingual teamwork, it's better for this position because I speak the languages. And in my last job, I handle this customer service department for the recollection department, and I think that I can try to, I don't know, to handle in this department or to participate in the department.
Awesome. Good. So perfect. Good job, like referencing your previous work experience. So another idea or just suggestion, especially for languages, if being fluent in English is one of the requirements, it's never a bad idea to say that you're still taking classes or that you're still studying, right? Because not only does it show that you are in fact like studying and like doing what you say you're doing, like studying English, it also shows that you're motivated enough to take classes on your own, to study on your own, and that you're continuing to learn. So if they say that one of the requirements is being bilingual, you can say, well, or like being bilingual in French and English, you could say, well, like I'm taking both English and French classes and continuing to study it. Because languages are one of those things that always get harder and harder. So you can always study more languages. So then what about you, Fabian? What kind of work positions do you find yourself in? What kind of interviews do you think you would have? What kind of jobs?
Yes, actually, I work in health. I am prosthetics and orthotics. I work with physical rehabilitation. I make prostheses for amputees.
Oh wow!
And actually, I am studying far away from my country, but I work with Crossred International. The Crossred International, and 2 or 3 years ago, I had an interview in Bogota to apply working directly with Crossred International. And I had an experience that they asked about my skills and my plans for the future.
Exactly. Awesome. So how would you respond? So what kind of requirements are there in the job description for that? Does it say, experience with making prosthetics or?
Yes, the requirements is a good experience with making prostheses and in clinical abilities with patients. The language is very important. They ask about if you know or if you speak another language, especially English or French. It's important because Red Cross is an international institute. It's a ONG.
So in English, NGO. Yeah.
Okay. NGO. It's important for them that you speak another languages.
Awesome. Yeah, great. So that's really relevant. So then how would you respond to the question, why should we hire you?
Okay, I told him that in this moment that I have been studying for 9 years in this area. I have worked in Bogota in a laboratory. I have a special abilities with technology and materials. I have been studying English for 2 years, and I continue studying online in this moment. And I want to practice a lot. And I think that the company could be get more how can I say, I stop. They can get more efficient people if I work there.
Awesome. Yeah, be more efficient. It's a really great word. Efficient is actually one of my favorite words if we're talking about job interviews. Efficient. Because that's also another word that you can use if you're talking about like weakness, right? So my greatest weakness is I want everything to be efficient, right? That's not really a weakness, but that's something that's really good in a company, right? You want things to run smoothly, run how they're supposed to. Exactly. Good, awesome. Great job, you guys. Okay, so then which question should we talk about next? Alexandra, which of these? Pull them up.
Sorry, I lost the sound. This. I think. How do you evaluate success?
Good. How do you evaluate success? Okay, this is a hard one. Yeah. Okay. So I don't have too many suggestions for this one, but all I have to say for this one is that make sure it combines both the values of the company and your own personal goals. Because obviously this is a personal question, right? How do you personally evaluate success? But it's one thing to keep in mind. So if you're working for an NGO, a non-governmental organization, or if you're working for like a big company like Microsoft or Google, their definitions of success are probably going to be a little bit different. So you want to keep in mind the kind of company that you're applying for. So for example, if I'm applying for like an NGO, I'm applying for like the Peace Corps, where they like go to other countries and help them, then I'm gonna want to say success about like social change, right? Social action, like effects that helps people, like bigger scale things, right? Whereas if it's a company, like a big company like Google or like Microsoft, that's not really going to be probably as important to them as an NGO. So you would want to say things like, like be a pioneer on the field of technology, right? Success is determined by, like the scope of the product, like how far it goes. You're just going to want to keep in mind who you're talking to. And this kind of goes back to the little video, right? Tailor your answers, right? Always keep in mind who you're talking to and what they would say if they were to answer the question. And then it's always important to keep a little bit of yourself, so don't totally try to give an answer that they want to hear. It's important to balance between who you're talking to and what your personal ideas of success are. So success can mean anything for a wide range of people. So I know that's not super helpful because it depends on the job you're applying for, but let's say you're applying to, okay, I'll start with you, so Fabian, let's say you're applying to Doctors Without Borders. That's like an NGO and you're going to go travel and give prosthetic legs to people that have less access to them. How would you say you evaluate success for that kind of job?
But for which company? I don't understand what kind of company.
So I was talking to Fabian, right? So to like an NGO that like travels to less developed countries and helps them gain access to prosthetic legs for people that otherwise wouldn't have access. So like rural parts of Asia, rural parts of Africa. Sorry?
Yes, for me it's important that you search in the website of the company and try to find the values of the company and say
exactly.
I think that if you want to work in a company, this company need to have the same value with like you have, no? Because it's important. For example, if you don't smoke and you don't agree with that, you can't work in a, I don't know, tobacco company.
Yeah, probably not. Exactly.
Yeah, you have a problem because you hate the tobacco. And it's important that you find all the values and try to match with your own values. I think that the answer is more easier if you try to match.
Right, yes, yeah, obviously the answers are easier if you found the perfect job for you. So a good way to research the company, so mission statement, that's something you're going to want to look for. If any of companies online, their websites, if they have like an about page and something like mission statement, that's going to be exactly what you want to look for to figure out, what they're all about, what their end goals are, why they created the company, exactly, things like that. So back to the hypothetical situation, Fabian. How do you evaluate success if you're applying for a company like that? What would you say?
I think that is very important to be agree with the mission statement of the company, because, for example, if I am applying to the NGO, but I don't like the mission abroad from my country, or if I don't like to be in a poor place or with families in difficult situations, in poverty, with poverty, for me it's difficult to say success is try to get engaged with the company. I think that you must to look for the ideal job, ideal company that you feel identified and you feel great in that job.
Exactly. So then what's your ideal company? How do you evaluate
I,
success, and what would your ideal company's mission statement be?
there for me there are two in my career. The NGOs is very special because you know a lot of people and you know the old faces from the humanity, from the people. Yeah, and you can work with people, foreign people, and learn more languages and learn more things. But you can use unless technology, the basic, for example. But if you work in a huge company like the Microsoft or the systems in my area, for example, is Autobock, is a Germany company, is the biggest company, and they have bionics products, hands and legs bionics is amazing. But you must work with people that have a lot of money, patients with a lot of money, and where is the people with poverty is another phase. And there's two different places, companies, but both of them are amazing.
Exactly, right, yeah. So that's a perfect example of within the same field, how there's two very distinct possible answers to a question like this. Exactly. So you could say, yeah, like technology and trying to develop the newest, the greatest thing, but that has the other side of who you're working with, right? Who your customers are. Or if your focus is the other side, exactly. So perfect. That's a really good example. Good. So then what about you, Alexandra? What's an ideal mission statement, or what's your idea of how you evaluate success for the kind of company you would want?
I have experience in finance, and this department it's very, I don't know, you need to be care about all the transactions that you make, and it's important that the company have a compliance officers and try to make the best work in the market, no? Because you work with money, and when you work with money, you need to you need to make all the transaction very clearly, because you have a lot of audits and you have a lot of, I don't know, all the company try to follow up your transaction. No? And
So I think so clear is a good word. Also to be transparent.
yes,
Transparent. Yeah, transparent is a word. So we're talking about like finance, and to be transparent means that it's easy to see what you're doing. Right? It's easy to see the transactions you're making, the things that you're to be transparent. Awesome, great. So good job. Those are perfect. Okay, so that was a hard one because it's really personal, right? There's not really a strategy you can take for that one. It all depends on the job and you as a person and what your goals are. Okay, so then, so Fabian, which one do you want to talk about next? Anyone else? Any other one that seems especially scary or that you wouldn't know how to answer?
No.
No? Okay, so then I'll just pick one. So one that I don't like answering is how do you handle stress and pressure? Because obviously that depends on the person. Okay. So this is how, it depends which one of these is true for you, obviously, but so these are 3 ways to answer that question. So stress and pressure. So one way is to say personal ways that you deal with stress and pressure. So things that are outside of work. So for example, I have on the slide, if you go to the gym every day, if you run 5 miles every day, that's how you personally deal with pressure. That's obviously going to be a perfect answer for the job because they can see that you do it on your own, that if you have a stressful job, you don't have to worry about it because you go to the gym every day, something like that. I don't do that, so that's not an option for me. So it's obviously only an option if that's something you actually do. And the second option I have is, so these are just possible answers. You don't have to use these, and especially if they're not true, make sure you're always being honest. So another way to answer this is to give examples how you work well under pressure. So how pressure or stress might make you be more productive. Because, for example, there's a lot of people that, like, if there's not a lot to do, they get bored. But if there's a deadline, it kind of provides motivation, and people are a lot more productive if they have a deadline. So I'm like that. So if I have a deadline, I'll do the work. But if someone gives me something to do and says, like, take your time, whenever you can finish it is fine, I'm probably less likely to do it than if someone gives it to me and says, you have to have this done by 6 p.m. today, then I'll say, oh, okay, and I'll do it really quickly, and probably well. So my answer to this would be that I work productively under stress, that I need it to fuel me and to motivate me. But if you're not like that, and if stress stresses you out and makes you not work well, there's this is my advice. So to outline how you handle large tasks. So instead of lying and saying stress and pressure make me work well, you can say, well, like, I don't work that well under pressure, but when I have big tasks, my approach is this, and to talk about how you approach things and how you make them easier for you to handle. So for example, you can say, if someone gives me a large task and a deadline, my approach is to break it down into smaller tasks and then take it one step at a time. Right? So those are 3 options, obviously depending on who you are as a person and how you deal with stress. But those are 3 perfectly good answers to that question from an employer's perspective. So, Alexandra, how do you handle stress? Do you have one of those options? Do you work well? What do you do if you get stressed or pressure or deadlines?
I try to go 3 times a week at gym to work out. Well, after the work, it's important to, I don't know how do you say in English, but to unstress.
Yeah, to de-stress. No? De-stress.
De-stress. And the second one for me is important to make a to-do list and try to order for the depend of the task or order to the importance. And keep in mind the deadlines. No, because it's important, and you can combine the small task with the important task or important duties.
Exactly, perfect. So that's phenomenal answer. That's really great. So you combine a little bit of the 2 of them, saying, like, in my personal life I do this, right? I work out to de-stress, but the way that I handle big projects is to break them down into smaller to-do lists. Awesome. Great job. So what about you, Fabian? How would you answer this question? How do you handle stress and pressure?
Okay, on my job, I have 3 tips to, because, for example, the first one is, I don't know how can say it, but I say time out in a special hour. I take 5 or 10 minutes as a quick pause.
Take a break. Yeah, take a break or a pause.
Yes, a break. And for example, I changed the place. I left the room, the consultory.
Yes. A good phrase for this is a change of environment. if you say like to de-stress, I need a change of environment,
Okay,
just like go take a walk and then come back or something.
Yes, and for example, I take I drink something, or I talk with another people from another other department to change my mind. For me, it's important in the morning or in the evening. I don't know.
Okay.
The second one is my time for lunch is very important. I take my time for lunch, and in my lunch I not work. I eat, I relax, and I sleep 50 minutes. I don't know, but my time of lunch is very important. And the other one is when I am at home, I stop working. I I don't answer my phone if it's a patient, or yes, I see the movie, relax. Work is work, and work.
Good, yeah, so good job of keeping it separate. Yeah, keeping like
Yes.
home and work separate. Okay,
Yes.
awesome. That's a really good strategy. Good job, you guys. Okay, so you guys nailed that one. You guys both have good answers for that. Okay, so then let's look at the other one. We'll do one or two more, and then I'll go through. I've got some tips about body language. Okay, so Alexandra, any other one that seems particularly scary?
Describe a difficult work situation, project, and how you overcame it.
Okay, good. So that goes back to one of the tips we talked about in the video, right? So these are also another word is anecdotes, right? Little mini stories that you can tell. So it's always a good idea to have these prepared beforehand, right? So good tips for preparing stories, to make sure you know what you're saying, and make sure you have, this is a tip I always give, make sure you have like facts. So like, let's say you're applying for an IT job, right, for technology, and they ask you for like a difficult time. You could say, well, like 2 years ago in the company I was working for, we had a big server crash, right? So the server crashed, and this is what I mean by having like data and facts, is you want to make the story good. So you want to say like, oh, like we had the data server crashed, and we had like 4,000 accounts. Like the information for 4,000 accounts went missing, but thankfully, like I discovered the problem within 10 minutes, and in half an hour we were back online. Right. So even little things like how much time it took you, how many accounts, like the number, like what was at stake, like why it was so bad. This is just a good tip for like storytelling, right? You want to make sure you include like some numbers, just some interesting facts to make the story good. Because otherwise, it would be vague and kind of boring if you just said, oh yeah, like 2 years ago the server crashed and I fixed it. Like you have to be a little bit more specific and give them a little bit more information so they understand, like how big the problem was and how big of a deal it was that you fixed it and that you came to the rescue and helped them out, and things like that. And then, yeah, so I have on the slides, these can be times that you excel, times you solved problems. It's always good to have at least one story of something that went wrong and then you helped fix, or things that you're particularly proud of. So it can be awards, it can be competitions, like moments with patients, anything like that. So based on that, do you guys have any ideas what kind of stories you would tell? Any sort of situation that was a catastrophe, something that went wrong that you helped fix, something that was an especially nice moment with coworkers or with clients or patients, anything like that? Any ideas?
Depend of the job position that you can apply.
So then what about customer service? So if you're applying for a job in customer service.
Yeah, so for accounting, you need to talk about the time that you collect or you mark the collections, and if you have a problem with some client, how do you solve this problem at the deadline, no?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's the
more
like,
under pressure, no?
Exactly. Yeah. So as you'll see, a lot of these questions sort of deal with the same thing, right?
To the positive.
Sorry. Yeah. So, and that's why this is sort of like, it's a question that can be asked. Like they can ask you, describe a situation that you've overcome. But this is also why it was one of the tips. Because even if you're not preparing for this specific question, you need to have stories prepared because they're useful for almost every question, right? So if someone asks you how you handle stress and pressure, and you say, I go to the gym and I make a to-do list, and they say, oh, like, what else? You know, like, tell us a little bit more. You can say, oh, well, you know, 2 years ago in my old company, this happened, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So then, what about you, Fabian? Do you have any anecdotes, any stories that you tell in job interviews? Any ones that you like to tell that you have prepared, that you've ever told?
Yes. When I returned from Salvador to Colombia, work in another city, I started, and the manager told me that what will I do if, for example, I had a difficult patients. It's normally in my career that, for example, the children, you don't know what they expect of them. For example, there are a lot of children that is quiet and easy to work, but others with, for example, with cerebral problems, they are very hard to work. And one day, for example, I had a problem with a patient that he was very angry, and I could not take a mold in his leg, and I asked to his mother, what does they like, what does he like. He said, he likes Barney, and I put on my laptop a chapter of Barney's chapter. It was magic. It was all the more or less 45 minutes watching the Barney's video, and I take them all, and it was perfect. And I found how can I get successful with that.
Awesome.
And
that's awesome. That's a great story.
My work is be creative.
Yeah, exactly. No, so that's a perfect example. So that's a great story, and it's one that you could use for lots of examples, right? If they ask you for a challenge, you can say that. If they ask you for a time that you've been creative, that's also a really good idea. And exactly, if they ask you how you work well with people, if you work well with children, that's another good example. So awesome. Yeah, so that's I think one of the biggest things you need to do is to prepare stories like that, because they're useful not just for one question, but especially if you don't know what to say. If they say, like, you know, tell me a little bit more about yourself, and you don't know what to say, it's always good to have stories prepared. Awesome. Okay, so good job. You guys did such a great job. So class is almost over, but before we end, I want to go through a few little tips about body language. So these can be important because you're making your first impression when you go for an interview. So there's just some do's and don'ts. They're not necessary, but they're just some good ideas. So just some things like only carry one item, don't show up with a backpack and a bag and a purse and everything. Make sure you dress well. Make sure you sit sort of angled, and make sure you're poised. So these are really specific advice, but it really just comes down to being confident and being prepared, right? So making sure that you are dressed appropriately, that you arrive on time, right? Always make sure you arrive either early or on time. Just keep in mind that this is the interviewer's first impression of you. So everything you do is what they're going to think of you as a person. So something that seems small, like arriving late, could have a really big effect on whether or not they hire you or what they think of you as a candidate. And then some don'ts, right? These are just being nervous, right? So like smiling nervously, touching your face and hair a lot, contracting and expanding. Just make sure you're confident. Make sure you know what you're going to say. And a lot of these can be easily avoided by practicing, right? Just make sure you know what you're going to say. You don't come off as rude. And you're not fidgeting, right? So you're not like answering the questions and doing this and constantly like touching, like, you know, you gotta make sure that you're calm, confident, you know what you're gonna say, and everything's gonna be okay. So that was class. We're almost out of time. So thank you both so much for coming. You guys had some really awesome answers to the questions. I hope you guys will feel a little bit more prepared the next time you have a job interview. And if you guys have time, I would love to, if you left me feedback. So on my Linguistiko page, if you go to my profile, you can leave feedback on the bottom. So suggestions, things I did well, things I could do better, anything at all. And then my next class for Linguistiko is going to be tomorrow at 3 p.m. Argentina time, which it depends what time zone you're in, but it's about future plans and retirement. So we're going to talk about plans for the future, projections into the future, and how to make the verb forms in the future tense.
And Michelle,
that's my next class. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Congrats. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. I hope to see you guys in another class. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.